So in this part of the tutorial, we're going to talk about the while loops. We've learned about the for loop, and we know that for loop consists of three elements inside of its condition. So it starts from an iteration, which is I, and it ends with a kind of an iteration, and it uses a kind of incrementing or decrementing order in order to change the amount of the iteration. So here, for example, we have started with the I equals to some number, and then it will end up to another number, and it will increment it. The while loop is pretty much the same, but it only has the second condition. So it says that if a statement is true, then it will break out of the loop. So let us first create a new file for the while loop, and then we will explain the rest of the codes inside of that. So here I'm going to create while.js. Also for the HTML, I can create while.html. So I can copy and paste it right over here and rename it to while.html. Okay, and here we need to change it to while.js. While.js. And by the way, I don't have F. So save the code and let's get back to while.js. So for any while loop, you also need to create or define a new variable. So we used to define a variable I inside of the for loop. So there was no need for defining another variable before the beginning of the for loop. But here in the while loop, we need to define kind of a variable, and it shouldn't be constant because it's going to change over and over again when we want to iterate through the loop. So here I'm going to create the new variable, call it and by using the let, and so let I equals to most commonly we use 0, but sometimes at the times that we want to decrement the variable, we'll start from a number depending on our circumstances, but here we want to start from 0. And in a while loop we have a condition. So in the while loop statement we have a kind of condition inside of the parentheses, and then the block starts. So first of all, the condition, if the condition holds, it will loop through the while loop, and if it doesn't, then it will break the loop. So, or in other words, if the condition holds, as long as the condition holds, it will stay inside of the loop, and then otherwise it will break out of it. But there are also times when we get into the block and do the things that should happen inside of the block, and then we will check for the statement. What I mean by that is that the condition that we have right over here in the parentheses will then be executed and checked afterwards the first execution of the loop. So let's get started and see how that happens. As you can remember, inside of the for loop we had 3 statements inside of the parentheses, but here we use the second one in order to check that kind of condition. So for example, we want to have the loop until I becomes, for example, 10. So as long as I is less than 10, we want something to happen. So first of all, let me increment I. So I plus plus, or we can say I plus equal 1. Also, for example, we can print I. Actually, we don't have print here, so console log I, and then we want to see what happens. Okay, so this is the simplest while loop that we can write in order to check how it works. So let me first get into here and find the while.html, open it with the browser, and here I want to see the console, so inspect the. So here inside of the console, let me close this one. Here inside of the console we have 0 up to 9, and as you can see, for 10 times we've been printing out or logging the variable to the console. So we've printed out or console.log the I variable for each time that we've incremented. We also have the do while, so to do that we can write do something. So we have do, then we have the block, and then we have the while, which we're going to put in the kind of condition we want it to hold. So let's see what is the difference between these two and how they will be executed differently. So here let us write I++, and then before that we can console.log I. Also, don't remember that because here we've incremented I will be changed to some number. So let us redefine I over here. However, because of this variable being inside of the block, here it will still remain 0. So let's check this for now here inside of the second console.log I afterwards, and here for now just let us comment this part of the code. So let's save the code and check it up over here, refresh the page. So here, as you can see, I is 10 because it's been incremented, and outside of a block it doesn't change anyway. So we need to assign number 0 to I once again, and so I equals 0, and let's uncomment this part, save the code, and see what happens over here. Also, let me comment this one. Okay, now save the code, and here refresh the page. So it seems to me that it's not okay. Let's refresh this. It hasn't been run, and let's check what's going on here. So we have console.log I here and here. I equals to 0, and it seems that it's not being refreshed. Okay, got the problem. I should be less than 10, not greater than 10. So now it's probably gets fixed here. So let's refresh the page, and as you can see, it starts from 0 up to 9, and here so I is 0, we will console.log I, then it will increment it, then we'll check the condition, and it goes on, and it's exactly the same as this process, with the difference that the checking process is done afterwards, the operation. But here let's imagine that I is less than, for example, 0. Also, I is less than 0 here as well. So let's save the code and refresh the page. As you can see here, we have only 1 0, and the reason is that checkpoint we have here. In our checkpoint here happens at first, and because I equals 0, we will never enter the while loop. But here, because the condition is afterwards the block, then because of the checkpoint is after the execution of the code for the first time, we will have console log I, which is 0, and then we will check if it's less than 0 or not. So for the first time it doesn't check, and the code is executed inside of the block, and then afterwards we will check that. So keep that in mind here. Because it's 10, it doesn't make any difference, but if that's a kind of number where it's on the edge of the condition, so for example here is 0 and the condition is I less than 0, then we will have the execution even if the condition does not hold. Okay, so this is a really important tip to keep in mind.